Welcome back, dedicated Spartans. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Zhang Weili and where she goes from here. Now, as you guys know, a couple weeks ago she was defeated in the first round by Rose Namajunas from a vicious head kick that knocked her out. Rose set the kick perfectly. I talked about all the time how Rose goes in bouncing on both her feet. She steps in nicely. If you want to see my reaction to that video, you can click the link right here and watch it, or the link down below. So the question is, where does Zhang go from here after this defeat? Now, I was a big fan of Zhang before the fight happened. I was a fan of Zhang before she became UFC champion. I known about her, heard about her through Spotlight MMA. They did a video on her. And a lot of people felt that she was not going to be able to win. Now, what I don't like is when a fighter loses, everyone comes out with some assumptions about them of the which they're just not true. People are saying she doesn't have enough experience to fight inside the UFC, and they're basing that on the fact that she's only had, they say she only had like 6 fights inside the UFC, and that's why she lost. Well, that has nothing to do with it. You know, Rose hasn't had that, she hasn't had a whole lot more fights than Zhang in the UFC at this point. Joanna, she didn't have a whole lot more fights than Zhang in the UFC. And what a lot of the fans don't understand is your experience inside the UFC doesn't always dictate. You know, a lot of people say you're only as good as the people you fight against. That's ludicrous. Because if that were the case, that would mean Mike Tyson was only as good as everybody else he knocked out in the first round, which is just not true. If that's the case, that would mean that everybody who ever defeated somebody, they were only as good as that person. No. Now, a more accurate assumption, which is what I get from Boss Root, and I like what he said. He said you're as good as your training partners in your team. Now, that's much closer to home. Yeah, you might be a little bit better than one guy or a little bit below another guy, but for the most part, the people you train with are going to dictate how good you are. And Alexander Gustafsson had this problem when he was in the first MMA gym he was in. People who watched him said he was better than everybody else there, so there was nowhere for him to grow. He was plateauing because he was already better than all his training partners. He was better than all his sparring partners, better than his wrestling partners, and so on. So he didn't have any area to go above and beyond. I know in my gym I hit with a whole lot of power, but there are guys in there, like my coach, for instance, he's got way better striking than I do. A couple of the guys I spar with have got really good striking, but one of my sparring partners, he's lows beyond me in grappling. He out-grapples me every time, and I work with him a lot because I know he's so much better than me. I'm only going to get better the more I work with him. And our coach even tells us, he said, it would be wonderful to me if one of you guys could finally match or surpass what I was able to teach you. But at the same time, that's very difficult to do because all the time while we're training under him, he's training to get better than he already is. So what can Zhang do? Number one, you cannot make excuses. And we heard a couple of excuses coming from her, and I didn't like what I heard for the most part. Even her cutting her hair, all those things are signs of a state that you are at mentally. When you're changing things about you physically, there's a sign of where you're at. You can't make excuses. And it's one thing if a fighter makes excuses. It's a whole lot worse when your coach makes or backs up the excuses you're making. That's not what a coach is supposed to do. I have discussion with people all the time about friendship, and I tell them one of the most important things about a friend is they're going to tell you what you don't want to hear. Because most of the time you want to hear, I did everything right, I didn't make any mistakes, it was something else's fault. A good friend's going to tell you, no, you did make mistakes, or in some cases you made outright bad choices. A mistake is an accident. If you're doing bad things on purpose, that's your fault. That's not a mistake, that's a bad choice. And they're going to correct you, even when you're doing things right. 2 coaches who do that very well. Trevor Whitman, who happens to be Rose's coach, he's one of them. He tells his fighters all the time, even when they're winning, he does not let them get away with the mistakes they're making. Valentina Shevchenko's coach, I don't remember his name, but when she fought Joanna, and I just watched that fight recently, she was dominating Joanna. Not just in the takedown, it wasn't just the size. She's a better striker than Joanna. That's why she beat her the way she did. If they were closer in weight, I don't think that would have made any difference on the fighting. Maybe a little bit with the shots that she was able to take, but she's a far better striker than Joanna is. As good as she was doing in that fight, her coach was talking to her like she was losing every round. Now, she was winning round after round after round, but he was on her like she was losing round by round. That's what a coach is supposed to do. He's not supposed to let you glide through like it's easy. When he sees mistakes being made, he should correct it. If you got a 10-9 round, a 10-9 round, but the coach can see you could do better, then your next round should be a 10-8 or a 10-7. That's the kind of coach you should desire to have. So my question is, what should Zhang do next? 1, you can't make the excuses. 2, go back and look at what went wrong. You were hit with something you didn't expect. I said in my own breakdown before the fight of Zhang versus Rose that Rose doesn't throw a whole lot of kicks. I said she might throw one in there, and she did. It's what won her the fight. But that's the thing. That was something that was more than likely overlooked. They weren't looking at that as a viable threat. Whenever you look at somebody as not being a threat, that's another mistake. So you can't make the excuses, and you can't look at people like they're not threats. Those are 2 things she needs to do. Thirdly, she needs to make sure her coach has her best interest at heart. If your coach is trying to tell you didn't do anything wrong, then he probably does not. And I'm not trying to call out our coach and say he's a bad person. Emotions might be very high at the moment, but the coach needs to be mentally stronger than the person he's training. He needs to be, because anybody can be physically tough in their body, but to be mentally tough, that's another level. That's one of the problems some fighters like Darren Till and Donald Cerrone dealt with. They're dealing with the mental aspect of the game, and a lot of people overlook that. Good coaches, they have to have that kind of conditioning. A lot of people even do mental exercises. Some people overlook that. So, aside from not making excuses and making sure her coach has her best interests at heart, she's got to look at everybody in that division as a threat now. Now, a lot of people are going to look at Zhang. If she comes out mentally weak, they're going to understand, okay, she has issues with mind games. So now there are weapons people can use against her. And I really, really believe that she felt that fight she should not have lost. And I even said it leading up to this fight. I said, this is a fight Zhang is supposed to win. She's supposed to destroy Rose. That's what people are thinking. But that's not what happened at all. It happened the fight was short. Like 1 minute, 14 seconds, 1 minute, 16 seconds, somewhere around that. And Rose is champion again. So, go back to the drawing board. Look at it as a loss. It's a loss. Learn from it. You got to learn from your mistakes. Look at everything. You look at this point like, I was overlooking the kicks. All right? I'm not going to do that again. I was going in here figuring I can't lose. Don't do that. A lot of very good fighters going in there know they can lose. They go in there knowing I can get my head bounced off this canvas like a ping pong ball. But that can happen. Will it happen? That's the area you have more control over. You can't control what can and cannot happen. But you can control how you're going to handle it and how you're going to prepare for what you know can happen. And so you can't leave anything off the drawing board. You can't leave off this person if this person appears to be slow with their hands. Don't dismiss their hand speed. There are a lot of fighters who have very fast hands who don't use their hand speed all the time because they're being tactical. Max Holloway is one of them. He has some extremely fast hand speed. We saw that recently with Max Holloway when he fought Calvin Kattar. A lot of people expected Kattar to be a little faster. Even DC when he was commentating, but he said, we saw Holloway come out and he was landing more shots than Kattar was. Now, granted, he came out a little differently, but that's what I'm saying. Small things like that you can't overlook. You don't try to train for any fighter you're fighting like they're a level below you. If we could put this to comparison, if you were in the heavyweight division and you were preparing to fight Mike Tyson, you wanted to fight Mike Tyson one day. Let's pretend this is 1990 and you were preparing to fight Mike Tyson. But there were 3 fighters in front of you. You should prepare for all 3 of those fighters with the same intensity that you prepared for Mike Tyson with. You never overlook your opponent. We've seen that happen before with Rockhold not taking Bisping as a serious threat. Knocked out in the first round. Now, do I think that Zhang might have slightly been overlooking Rose? Yeah, I do, a little bit. You, as a fighter and as a coach should recognize, even for his own fighter, when the opponent he's about to face is zoned in on destroying them. And that's what I said. I said, guys, Rose is focused. She's going into this fight looking to win, and she's a finisher. She said that herself. She doesn't like it when fights go the distance. One of the reasons people are a fan of her fighting style, including myself, is because she goes out there with the intention of getting a finish. She's like, I'm not leaving this to the judges. I like that about fighters anyway. That's the way I train. I train to finish fights. But that is an aspect of fighting that is going to dictate the way fighters fight. When you fight, part of your personality comes out even by the style you choose. People who are patient and nice, like Wonder Boy, that's why they fight the way they do. Same with Weili Machida. patient fighter. That's why they had that similar style. People who need to put pressure in there. That's why they fight like Tyson, they swarm, or Frankie Edgar, very similar style fighter. People who just don't care. Nate Diaz gets hit a lot, has some of the worst defense, but also one of the biggest stars, and he makes his style work as best he can for him. So those are the things Zhang needs to do before moving forward. Now, she still had the belt. She defended the belt once. Can she call for an immediate rematch? Maybe, maybe not. For the most part, people allowed a lot of champions who held the belt really well to do so. Joanna got knocked out in the first round, and she got an immediate rematch with Rose. Went the distance, lost again. Then Rose faced Jessica Andrade. And then we know Jessica Andrade knocked Rose out. Rose got a rematch with Andrade, but Rose actually did not want the rematch right away. She decided to wait. But she could have gotten an instant rematch. Now, can Zhang get an instant rematch? I believe so. I doubt the UFC would say no because she's got serious star power. A whole lot of, they're bringing in a lot of the Asian market because Zhang was the first Chinese champion. So I don't think she won't get one, but she's got to be ready for that fight. And those are just some things that I feel she needs to do before moving forward. You got to make sure your coach cares about you. If your coach is trying to make excuses for you, they don't. That's not a maybe. That's not my opinion. That's not the way I feel. That's just the truth. Coaches, that's why they're coaches. They're not going to make excuses for you. You're a grown person. You need to handle your problems like a grown person. And coaches are not going to coddle you in your bad choices or your mistakes. Even your mistakes. They're going to be on you like they're bad choices. If you're making a bad choice, they should be harder on you. You know, at that level of fighting, at that level of competition, you've got to be focused. And so you can't let the bad thing that happened change the way you are for the worse. That's the thing. A lot of people you should change and learn from your experiences to do better, but you shouldn't do worse. So, you know, making excuses, that never looks good. You know, a lot of people don't like Luke Rockhold because they said he was smug, but I'm like, as much as you guys say he was smug and arrogant, I don't recall him ever making an excuse for why he lost. Not once. And if anybody had a reason to make excuses, it was Rockhold. He had lots of injuries. I mean, you could look up videos of them pulling fat out of his body for his skin grafts. That video, it would look weird when he had that thing on his shin to help close his skin. So if he could have made excuses about injuries, it was him. But not once after his fights or even the post-fight press conference did he say, oh, I lost this fight because this was injured or that was injured. You know, people, it's been years since he lost to Bisping. And he's just now answering people, not about why he lost. He just said one of the reasons his defense was bad was because his shoulder was injured. But that's because they asked him about the surgery. He didn't bring it up. So even after all that time, still not trying to make an excuse as to why he lost. That's what you can't do. You've got to say, all right, I made the mistake. I made the bad choice. This is how I'm going to correct it. You've got to have that attitude to move forward. That's what Zhang needs to do.